At 8:14 on a Tuesday morning, 22-year-old Elena Voss was supposed to be at work. Instead, her apartment was empty. Her front door was locked. Her car was still parked outside. Her purse was sitting on the kitchen counter. Her wallet was inside it, and beside the bedroom door was something that immediately disturbed investigators. Elena's shoes were still there. She had apparently walked out barefoot. But that wasn't the strangest part. 2 days later, investigators would discover that Elena's phone had been traveling across the city the entire time, and whoever was carrying it seemed determined to make them believe Elena was still alive. Elena lived alone in a quiet apartment complex in the fictional city of Belhaven. She worked at a small architectural firm and had a reputation for being organized, cautious, and predictable. She wasn't someone who disappeared. On Monday evening, Elena spoke to her younger brother, Adrian, around 9:30 p.m. The conversation was ordinary. She complained about work. They joked about their mother's habit of calling too often. Elena told Adrian she'd see him that weekend. Nothing sounded wrong. At 10:47 p.m., Elena sent one final message to a coworker. It simply said, "I'll explain tomorrow." The coworker assumed it was about a project. There was no reason to think otherwise. At 7:02 the following morning, Elena's alarm went off. According to her phone records, she turned it off. At 7:18 her apartment door opened. That should have been the moment Elena left for work. But she never arrived. By 8:30, her supervisor called her. No answer. At 9:10 Adrian tried. Nothing. By noon he was standing outside Elena's apartment. When police entered, there were no obvious signs of a struggle. Her bed was made. Her laptop was open. A half-finished cup of coffee sat on the kitchen counter. And her purse hadn't moved. That made no sense. If Elena had decided to leave voluntarily, why would she leave without money, identification, shoes, or her car? Then investigators noticed something else. Her phone was missing. At first, that seemed almost reassuring. Maybe Elena had taken it. Maybe she had simply gone somewhere unexpectedly. But detectives checked the phone's location. At 8:06 a.m., it had connected to a cell tower near Elena's apartment. At 8:42, it appeared several miles away. At 9:17, it moved again. Then again at 10:03. By noon, the phone was on the opposite side of Belhaven. Investigators initially assumed Elena was carrying it. Then they checked the surrounding footage. At 8:42, a security camera outside a pharmacy captured a person holding what appeared to be Elena's phone. But the person's face wasn't visible. At 9:17, another camera caught the same phone near a bus station. Again, the person carrying it remained out of frame. That was when the case changed. Someone had Elena's phone. But where was Elena? Detectives returned to her apartment and reconstructed the morning. The door had been locked. There was no broken window. Nothing appeared stolen. Nothing appeared disturbed. Except for one detail. On Elena's bedroom floor, investigators found a tiny smear of dirt beside the doorway. It looked insignificant, until they compared it with the dirt found on the bottom of the missing phone case. The particles appeared to match soil from a construction area nearly 6 miles away, a place Elena had never mentioned visiting. And then, at 6:41 that evening, Elena's phone moved again. This time, it stopped at an abandoned warehouse on the edge of Belhaven. For the first time since she vanished, the phone stopped moving. Detectives rushed there. The warehouse was empty. No Elena. No suspect. No obvious evidence. Just one thing sitting on the concrete floor beneath a broken window. Elena's phone. Its battery was almost dead. And when detectives examined the screen, they found something that made the entire timeline impossible. The phone had recorded a voice message at 6:38 p.m., only 3 minutes before it was abandoned. The message contained just 7 words. A woman's frightened voice whispered, "Please don't let him find me." Then the recording ended. Because investigators knew Elena's voice, they immediately recognized it. But there was one problem. The voice message hadn't been sent to anyone. It had simply been recorded. And buried inside the audio was a faint sound that nobody noticed at first. a door closing, then a man's voice, and what he said would become the first clue pointing investigators toward the real mystery. She was never supposed to leave. The voice recording should have given detectives an answer. Instead, it created a much bigger question. Who was the man Elena was afraid of? Investigators enhanced the audio from the warehouse. The man's voice was too faint to identify, but the words were clear enough. She was never supposed to leave. There was another detail. The door heard closing in the recording sounded heavy and metallic. Detectives compared it with photographs of the warehouse. There were several doors inside, but only one had the same distinctive metal sound. It led to a small storage room. Inside, investigators found nothing that appeared connected to Elena. No clothing, no blood, no personal belongings. But beneath a layer of dust, they found a fresh shoe print. It was approximately the same size as Elena's. That discovery changed the timeline. If Elena had been inside the warehouse, why were her shoes still sitting beside her apartment door? And if someone had carried her there, why would they leave behind a footprint? Then investigators discovered something even stranger. The warehouse had a security camera. It hadn't been working for months, or so the property manager claimed. When detectives checked the system, they discovered that the camera had recorded exactly one useful clip on the day Elena disappeared. At 6:27 p.m., a dark sedan entered the property. 10 minutes later, someone walked toward the warehouse carrying Elena's phone. The person's face was hidden by a hood, but the car was visible. Investigators traced the license plate. It belonged to Elena Voss, Elena's younger brother. For the first time, suspicion turned toward the one person who had seemed desperate to find her. Adrian denied going anywhere near the warehouse. He insisted his car had been parked outside his apartment all evening. But investigators checked his building's security footage. His car was gone for nearly 2 hours. When detectives confronted him, Adrian finally admitted something. He had lied. He had driven across Belhaven that evening. But he claimed he wasn't searching for Elena. He said he was following someone. A man Elena had mentioned several days earlier. Adrian called him Marcus Vale. Marcus had once worked with Elena on a private architectural project. According to Adrian, Elena became increasingly uncomfortable around him. She never explained why. She simply told her brother, "If Marcus contacts me, don't answer." That sentence had never appeared in the initial police report. Adrian had kept it secret because Elena had asked him not to tell anyone. Now detectives needed to know why. They found Marcus the following morning. He admitted knowing Elena. He admitted speaking with her the night before she disappeared. But he denied threatening her. Then he said something that stopped the interview cold. Marcus claimed Elena had called him at 7:11 that morning. That was before she supposedly left her apartment. According to Marcus, Elena sounded frightened. She told him someone was inside her building. Then the call abruptly ended. Marcus said he never heard from her again. Investigators checked Elena's phone records. There was no outgoing call to Marcus at 7:11. But there was an incoming connection from an unknown number lasting 11 seconds. The number had been masked. And that wasn't all. The phone's location data placed Elena's device inside her apartment at that exact time. Someone had been using it. But who? Detectives returned to Elena's apartment and examined the building's access records. At 7:04 a.m., Elena's key fob opened the main entrance. At 7:08, her apartment door was opened from inside. At 7:18, the apartment door opened again. After that, there were no recorded entries. The obvious conclusion was that Elena had left at 7:18. But the evidence suggested something else. Her shoes were still inside. Her car was still outside. Her purse was untouched. And her phone was apparently already being manipulated. Then investigators discovered the most disturbing clue yet. The apartment's smart speaker had automatically recorded a short fragment of sound at 7:16 a.m. At first, it sounded like static. After cleaning the recording, detectives heard Elena's voice. She wasn't speaking to the smart speaker. She was talking to someone in the room. Her words were barely audible. "You promised you wouldn't come back." Then came a man's reply. 3 words. You called me. The recording ended. But investigators now knew something they hadn't known before. Elena wasn't alone when she disappeared. And whoever was inside that apartment had arrived before she supposedly walked out. For viewers of a darker shade of truth, this was the moment the mystery stopped looking like a disappearance. It started looking like a carefully constructed illusion. But there was still one question nobody could answer. If someone had entered Elena's apartment, why had they left almost no trace? The answer appeared the next morning. A forensic technician examining Elena's laptop discovered a deleted folder created just hours before she vanished. His name contained only 4 characters. Move. Inside was a single photograph. It showed Elena standing beside Marcus Vale. But Marcus wasn't the disturbing part. Behind them, reflected in a window, was another person. Someone Elena appeared to be watching. And when investigators enlarged the reflection, they recognized the face. It was Adrian. The photograph wasn't proof that Elena had escaped. It was proof that someone had been helping her. And when investigators finally understood what the MOVE file meant, the entire disappearance began to make sense. The file wasn't a plan for Elena to run away. It was a warning. Elena had discovered that money was being secretly diverted from her architectural firm through a construction company. But she had also discovered something worse. Someone inside the company was monitoring employees who knew too much. Daniel Rusk had been involved. But he wasn't the mastermind. He had been pressured into helping hide the financial records. Elena discovered this 3 weeks before she disappeared. That's why she took the photograph of Elena and Marcus. She wasn't photographing Marcus. She was photographing the person reflected behind them. The person investigators initially mistook for Adrian. It wasn't Adrian. It was Graham Voss, Elena's uncle and a senior executive connected to the construction company. He had been quietly monitoring Elena after discovering that she had copied the financial records. And Elena had noticed him. That's why she told Adrian, "If Marcus contacts me, don't answer." Marcus had unknowingly become connected to Graham through the construction project. Elena wasn't sure who she could trust, so she created a backup plan. If she disappeared, the MOVE folder would point investigators toward the phone trail. But the trail wasn't designed to show where Elena went. It was designed to convince Graham that she had successfully escaped his surveillance. On the morning Elena disappeared, Graham confronted her inside her apartment. The smart speaker captured the exchange. "You promised you wouldn't come back." Graham replied, "You called me." Elena had secretly contacted him because she knew confrontation was inevitable. But she had already prepared. Before Graham arrived, Elena had copied the financial evidence to a hidden storage device and arranged for it to be released if she didn't check in. When Graham realized what she had done, he took her phone. But Elena had already activated the first part of her plan. A second phone, identical to hers, had been prepared weeks earlier. That was the device Graham eventually planted at the warehouse. He believed he was controlling the trail. He wasn't. Elena had deliberately created enough misleading information to make everyone, including Graham, believe the phone was the key to finding her. It wasn't. The real phone had been hidden. And Elena had left one final instruction inside the MOVE file. The person who found it would know to look for the missing storage device. Investigators eventually recovered it from a secure locker Elena had rented under a false name. Inside were copies of the financial records, photographs, messages, and recordings connecting Graham to the scheme. There was also a recording of Elena explaining why she disappeared. She said she knew Graham would come after her if he believed she still had the evidence. So she chose the only option she believed could keep her alive: disappear before he knew where she was going. But Elena hadn't planned to stay hidden forever. She had arranged to contact investigators once the evidence was secure. And she did. 3 months after the investigation began, Elena walked into a police station in another state. Alive. She had been staying with someone she trusted and had avoided using her real name. She explained that she had watched the investigation from a distance. She knew Adrian was being suspected. She knew Marcus was being questioned. And she knew Daniel had eventually been arrested. but she couldn't come forward until she knew Graham had been exposed. When investigators asked why she hadn't simply called the police, Elena gave them an answer that explained the entire mystery. She didn't know which person inside the company was working with Graham. She had seen how easily information disappeared. She didn't know who she could trust. The evidence from Elena's storage device eventually led investigators directly to Graham. The financial records, surveillance photographs, and recordings connected him to the scheme. He was arrested and later convicted on multiple financial and conspiracy charges. Daniel cooperated with investigators and admitted his role. Marcus was cleared of involvement in Elena's disappearance. And Adrian was finally cleared of suspicion. The strange phone movements now had an explanation. The fake phone at the warehouse had been planted to create a false trail. The unknown man in the apartment footage had been Graham. The frightened voice recording had been Elena. And the photograph sent to Adrian months later? Elena had arranged for it to be delivered. She wanted her brother to know she was alive without revealing where she was. For nearly a year, everyone had been asking the wrong question. Where did Elena go? The real question had been, who was Elena trying to stay ahead of? And once investigators discovered the answer, every strange clue finally fell into place. Elena hadn't vanished because she wanted to leave her life behind. She vanished because she believed disappearing was the only way to survive long enough to expose the person hunting her. Her phone had been a decoy. The warehouse had been a trap. The move folder had been a warning. And the mystery that had terrified her family for months finally had an answer. Elena Voss wasn't missing. She had been hiding. And sometimes the most impossible disappearance isn't about someone being taken. It's about someone knowing exactly when they need to disappear. If you enjoyed following every clue with us, subscribe to A Darker Shade of Truth for more mysteries where nothing is quite what it seems.